I booked a vacation months ago. When I refused to cancel it to babysit, my sister lied to our family, weaponized her kids, and even contacted my workplace. I, 30F, booked my vacation months ago. I planned the dates around my work schedule, paid for everything up front, and made sure all my time off was approved. This wasn't a random trip I threw together last minute. I needed the break badly and had been counting down to it for weeks. About 3 weeks before I was supposed to leave, my sister called me and immediately started ranting about how chaotic her life was. She didn't even ask how I was doing. She just went straight into complaining about schedules, school stuff, and how tired she was. She talked for a long time, and I already had a bad feeling because whenever she starts conversations like that, it usually means she wants something. Then she finally said, "So I'm gonna need you to stay with the kids while I sort this out. Not can you, not would you be able to, just straight to I need you to." I told her, "No, I won't be here. I already told you I'm traveling that week." She went quiet for a second and then said, "Okay, but you can reschedule, right?" I said no, everything was already paid for and I wasn't canceling. She laughed like I was joking and said, "It's not like you're going somewhere important. This is real life, not a vacation fantasy." That pissed me off immediately. I told her she was being dismissive and that my plans mattered too. She said, "I'm not asking for much. It's just family stepping up." I said, "It's not stepping up if you're deciding for me." She said, "So you're really saying no?" I said, "Yes, I'm saying no." She got cold and ended the call fast. I thought that was it. It wasn't. A couple days later, I started getting messages from relatives asking if I was helping out with the kids and if I was still going on my little trip. That's when I realized she had already told people I was supposed to babysit and that I was suddenly backing out. I texted her and said, "Why are people messaging me like I agreed to this?" She replied, "Because I told them you were helping unless something came up." I said, "Nothing came up. I never agreed. Stop telling people that." She said, "I assumed you wouldn't actually leave me hanging." That made me furious. I told her, "You don't get to assume my time belongs to you." She called me immediately and started yelling that I was being dramatic and making her look bad by correcting people. I yelled back, "You made yourself look bad by lying about me." She said, "It's not lying, it's family expectations." I said, "Your expectations are not my obligation." She told me I was acting like I didn't care about anyone but myself and that I've changed. I told her, "No, I just stopped letting you volunteer me for your problems." She said I was selfish and that I don't understand responsibility. I said, "I understand responsibility just fine. I just don't accept being dumped on." She hung up on me. Then my parents started texting. My mom said I needed to stop being confrontational and just help her this once. I said, "This isn't once." She never even asked. My dad said I should be more flexible because family should come first. I said, "So when do I come first?" He didn't answer that. He just said I was being stubborn. I told him, and she's being controlling. After that, my sister switched tactics. She started sending me long messages about how stressed she was, how she couldn't sleep, how she was at her breaking point. Then she'd end it with, "I don't know what I'm going to do if you don't help." I told her, "You need to figure out childcare, not guilt me." She said, "Wow, so cold." I said, "No, I'm just not playing this game." Then she started involving the kids, sending photos and saying things like, "They keep asking when you're coming to stay with them." I told her to stop doing that and to stop dragging them into adult problems. She said, "They deserve to know who actually cares." That set me off. I told her, "Don't you dare turn them into emotional leverage." She said I was twisting her words and making her out to be a bad mother. I told her, "Right now you are being a bad sister." She started crying on the phone and shouting that I was attacking her when she was already struggling. I yelled back that she was the one attacking me nonstop and acting like I owed her free childcare. She said, "So you really care more about your stupid vacation than your own family?" I said, "I care about not being treated like your backup plan." Then she started posting vague things online about being abandoned and learning who really shows up when things get hard. People started messaging me asking what happened. I replied to one person and said, "She asked me to cancel my trip to babysit." I said no. That got back to her immediately. She messaged me and said, "Stop making me look like a villain." I said, "Then stop acting like I agreed to something I didn't." She called me screaming that I was ruining her reputation and humiliating her. I told her she did that herself by lying about me. She said I was heartless and that I'd regret treating her this way. I said, "Stop threatening me because you don't like my answer." Then she blocked me, unblocked me, and started again with messages about how desperate she was and how no one ever helps her. I told her, "You don't get to rewrite reality just because you don't like it. She said, I can't believe I have a sister like you. I said, I can't believe I'm being harassed for saying no once. Then she went to our parents again and told them I was attacking her and making things worse. They called me and said I needed to stop antagonizing her and just compromise. I said, what compromise? Either I babysit or I don't. They said I was being rigid and selfish. I said, and she's being aggressive and manipulative. They said I was tearing the family apart. I said, she started this by lying about me. They told me I should think about how this will affect future relationships. I told them, maybe she should think about that before trying to bully me. After that, she contacted my workplace claiming she might not be able to reach me because of a family crisis. My supervisor asked me if everything was okay. I was embarrassed and furious. I messaged her and said, do not involve my job in your drama ever again. She said she was just being responsible and thinking ahead. I told her she was crossing a line and trying to pressure me. She said, maybe if you acted like family, I wouldn't have to. I said, threatening my job is not family behavior. She said I was cold and calculating and that I didn't deserve support. I told her, you don't get to demand support while attacking me. After that, nobody spoke to me directly, but I kept hearing that she was telling people I abandoned her and that she was completely alone. Then she called me again and asked, so you're really still going? I said yes. She said, I can't believe you're doing this to me. I said, I can't believe you're still acting like this is my fault. She said I was choosing myself over everyone else. I said, I'm choosing not to be controlled. She said I was selfish, cold, and heartless. I told her she was entitled, manipulative, and exhausting. She said, don't expect me to ever forgive you. I said, stop acting like forgiveness is a weapon. Then my parents jumped in and started yelling too, saying I was destroying relationships and being cruel. I yelled back that I was done being blamed for refusing to give up my life for her convenience. They said I was stubborn and difficult. I said, and she's aggressive and relentless. Everyone was shouting over each other and nobody was listening to anything except what they wanted to hear. I hung up and stopped responding to messages after that. Update 1. She didn't talk to me directly. Instead, she started talking around me. It started with one message from a relative asking, are you still going on that trip or are you helping with the kids instead? I thought it was random until another message came in asking almost the same thing. Then another one saying, your sister said you were staying with them. What happened? That's when it hit me that she had already told people I was supposed to babysit and that I was suddenly changing my mind. I messaged her and said, why are people asking me about this like I already agreed? She replied, because I told them you were helping unless something came up. I said, nothing came up. I never agreed to anything. Stop saying that. She said, I assumed you wouldn't actually leave me hanging when it came down to it. That made me furious. I told her, you don't get to assume my time belongs to you. She immediately called me and started yelling before I could even say hello. She said I was overreacting and making her look bad by correcting people and acting like she lied. I yelled back, you made yourself look bad by lying about me. She said, oh my God, it's not lying, it's family expectations. I snapped, your expectations are not my obligation. She said I was acting like a stranger and that I've changed and that I used to be more supportive. I told her, no, I just stopped letting you volunteer me for your problems. She said I was selfish and only cared about myself and that I was acting superior because I don't have kids. I said, don't drag that into this. You don't get to treat me like unpaid staff because you chose to have kids. She screamed that I was disrespectful and heartless. I screamed back that she was entitled and manipulative. She hung up on me. Not even 5 minutes later, my mom texted saying I needed to stop being confrontational and just work something out. I replied, there's nothing to work out. I already said no. She said, you don't have kids. You don't understand how hard this is. I said, and you don't understand that I'm not available and I already made plans. She said I was being cold and that family doesn't abandon each other. I said, I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm just not canceling my life. She replied, so your vacation is more important than your sister struggling? I said, stop turning this into a competition. I said, no, that's it. Then my dad texted and said I needed to be more flexible and that sometimes you sacrifice for family. I said, I already sacrificed plenty of time before. This time I said no. He said I was being stubborn and dramatic. I said, and she's being controlling and spreading lies about me. He didn't respond to that, just said we would talk later. Meanwhile, my sister kept posting vague stuff online about being disappointed in people and finding out who you can really count on when things get hard. People started reacting to it and messaging me privately asking what was going on. One person said, she seems really stressed. Are you okay? Another said, I didn't know you weren't helping anymore. I replied to a couple of them saying I never agreed to babysit and I wasn't canceling my trip. That got back to her fast. She messaged me, why are you telling people our business? I said, you already told people lies about me, so I corrected them. She said, you're trying to make me look like a bad mother. mother. I said, no, I'm making you look like someone who doesn't take no for an answer. She called me again and started screaming that I was humiliating her and that everyone was judging her now. I yelled back, then stop posting cryptic crap and telling people I bailed on you. She said I was ruining her reputation. I said, you ruined it when you opened your mouth about something that wasn't agreed to. She said I was acting like I hated her. I said, right now I hate how you're treating me. That made her cry and scream at the same time, saying I had no compassion and that I didn't care about what she was dealing with. I told her, I can care and still say no. Those are not the same thing. She said, normal sisters would help. I said, normal sisters would ask instead of assume. She called me selfish again and said I always put myself first. I said, and you always put your problems on other people. She said I was cruel for saying that. I said, and you're cruel for trying to guilt me into giving up my plans. She hung up again. Later that night, my mom messaged me saying my sister was crying and that I needed to apologize for how harsh I was. I said, I'm not apologizing for defending myself. She said I should be the bigger person. I said, being the bigger person always seems to mean I'm the one who has to give in. She said I was being dramatic. I said, and she's being relentless. Then my sister sent me a long message saying she couldn't believe I was choosing a vacation over her kids and that one day I'd understand how hurtful this was. I replied, stop acting like I'm abandoning your kids. I said no to babysitting, not to being in their lives. She said, you don't get it. I said, no, you don't get that no means no. She said I was heartless again and that she would never forget this. I told her, stop trying to scare me into changing my mind. She said I was impossible to talk to. I said, because you only want to hear yes. After that, she stopped messaging me directly but kept posting about betrayal and being disappointed in people you trust. People kept watching, reacting, and quietly asking me what was going on. I didn't post anything publicly after that, but my phone didn't stop buzzing with messages from family asking if I had reconsidered yet. Every single one of them made me more angry because none of them were telling her to stop lying or stop pressuring me. They were all asking when I was going to give in. Update 2. I didn't hear it from her. I heard it from a cousin who messaged me out of nowhere saying my sister was worried about me and thought I was spiraling and that I was making impulsive decisions. I just stared at my phone because I hadn't said anything to anyone except that I wasn't babysitting and I wasn't canceling my trip. I called my sister immediately and said, why are you telling people I'm unstable now? She didn't even deny it. She said, I'm explaining why I can't depend on you. I yelled, you can't depend on me because I said no, not because I'm losing my mind. She yelled back, normal sisters would help. You always have to be difficult and dramatic about everything. Hold on tight. Before I share the full story, tap that like, subscribe, and let's talk in the comments. Would you have done the same thing? I said, normal adults don't dump childcare on someone who already said no and then trash them when they don't cave. She said, so now you think you're better than me? I said, no, I think I'm not your emergency substitute and I'm not your backup plan when you don't arrange your own stuff. She started crying and yelling at the same time, saying she couldn't believe I'd abandoned her when she was overwhelmed and that I was heartless for choosing a vacation over her kids. I told her, you're overwhelmed because you refuse to plan and you expect everyone else to fix it, not because of me. That made her scream that I was cruel and judgmental and that I was acting like she was some kind of failure. I told her, and you're acting like I owe you my time and my money and my plans. She said I was cold and selfish and that I never think about anyone but myself. I said, says the person trying to hijack my schedule and smear my name when she doesn't get what she wants. She hung up on me again. Within an hour, she posted another vague rant about finding out who really supports you when you're drowning and how some people only care about themselves. People started reacting, sharing it, and messaging me asking if everything was okay. One person straight up asked if I was okay mentally because my sister sounded worried. That pushed me over the edge. I replied to that person, I'm fine. I said no to babysitting and she didn't like it. That got back to her fast. She messaged me, stop making me look like a villain. I said, then stop telling people I'm unstable. She said, I never said you were unstable. I said you were acting different. I said, you told people I'm spiraling. Don't play dumb now. She said, I was worried about you. I said, no, you were mad at me and you wanted sympathy. She called me again and started yelling that I was ruining her reputation and making people think she was manipulating me. I yelled back, you are manipulating me and now you're mad that people know the real reason I said no. She called me selfish, cruel, fake, and said I've always been jealous of her. That one shocked me. I said, jealous of what? Your habit of dumping your stress on everyone else and then playing victim. She screamed that I was attacking her and that I was kicking her while she was down. I said, you started this by telling people I'm unstable unstable. Don't act surprised when I defend myself. She said, you don't even care how this makes me look. I said, you didn't care how it made me look when you told people I was losing it. She said I was dead to her and that she was done with me. Then she blocked me on one app. 2 days later, she unblocked me and messaged me like nothing happened and said, so are you canceling the trip or not because I still need help? I couldn't believe it. I said, you just told me I was dead to you and now you're asking me to drop everything again. She said, I said that because I was emotional. I said no because I meant it. She said I was being spiteful and holding a grudge. I said, I'm holding a boundary. Learn the difference. She said I was punishing her for being honest about being overwhelmed. I said, you weren't honest. You were trashing me to everyone. She said, I needed people to understand what I'm dealing with. I said, then talk about yourself, not about me. She said I was impossible and that I loved watching her struggle. I said, you love blaming me for your problems. After that, she started sending me long messages late at night saying she felt betrayed, then angry messages saying I was selfish, then sad messages saying she didn't know how she was going to manage, all in the same day. It felt like she was trying every angle to wear me down. At the same time, other relatives started messaging me asking if I was okay, if I was stressed, if I needed help, and if I was making decisions too fast. It was obvious she was still framing this like I was having some kind of breakdown instead of just saying no. I snapped at one of them and said, stop treating me like I'm unstable. I'm not babysitting. That's the whole story. That got back to her too. She messaged me furious saying I was turning people against her. I said, you turned them against me first by lying about me. She said, I never lied. I said, you told people I was spiraling. That's not the truth. She said, fine, maybe I exaggerated, but I was upset. I said, so your feelings give you permission to smear me? She said I was twisting everything and making her sound horrible. I said, you're doing that all by yourself. She told me to stop acting like I was perfect. I said, I never said I was perfect. I said I'm not your free babysitter. She said I was cold again and that I didn't care about her kids. I said, stop using your kids as a weapon in an argument. That made her explode and accuse me of attacking her parenting. I told her, no, I'm attacking your behavior toward me. She said she was done explaining herself and that I should be ashamed of how I was acting. I said, and you should be ashamed of telling people I'm unstable because you didn't get your way. She stopped responding after that, but the posts didn't stop. More vague stuff, more comments, more reactions, more people quietly watching and whispering. Update 3. Instead of ranting or posting vague stuff, she started sending me pictures of her kids with captions like, they keep asking when you're coming to stay with them, and they're excited because I told them you might help. The first time she sent one, I replied, stop involving them in adult arguments. She said, they deserve to know who actually cares about them. That set me off immediately. I told her, do not use your kids as emotional leverage. That is disgusting. She said, you're twisting everything like always. I said, no, you are straight up weaponizing them to make me feel guilty. She sent a voice message crying and saying she couldn't believe I was accusing her of being a bad mother and that I was attacking her parenting now. I sent one back saying, I'm not talking about your parenting. I'm talking about how you're dragging your kids into a fight that has nothing to do with them. She replied, everything I do is for them, unlike you. I said, don't act like I'm hurting your kids because I won't rearrange my life for you. She said, they notice who shows up and who doesn't. I said, you are creating this narrative, not them. She said I was cold, detached, and that I didn't have real responsibilities so I couldn't understand what real stress was. I said, and you don't get to decide whose time is disposable just because you're overwhelmed. Then she started messaging more aggressively, asking what kind of aunt says no when family needs help, saying I was setting an example that it's okay to abandon people when things get hard. I told her, stop rewriting reality. You're not asking for help, you're demanding control. She said, you always make everything sound dramatic so you can justify being selfish. I said, and you always frame yourself as helpless so you can pressure people into fixing your problems. She called me bitter and said I had some kind of grudge against her. I said, no, I have a problem with you trying to emotionally blackmail me. That made her furious and she accused me of using big words to make her look abusive. I said, you're doing that all on your own. She stopped messaging after that and I thought maybe she'd finally back off. I was wrong. Later that week, we both ended up at the same family gathering. I didn't even know she was going to be there until I walked in and saw her already talking to people and looking right at me. I tried to avoid her, but she walked straight up to me in front of everyone and said, loud enough for half the room to hear, "So are you finally ready to admit you don't care about my kids?" Everyone went quiet. I said, "Don't do this here." She said, "Why not? You don't mind telling everyone you won't help, so say it again." I said, just as loud, "I care about your kids. I just won't cancel my life to fix your mess." She said, "Wow, listen to yourself. You really think you're above helping your own family?" I said, "I think I'm above being bullied into it." She said I was humiliating her and making her look desperate. I said, "You're the one who started yelling at me in front of everyone." She said, "Because you keep dodging the truth." I said, "The truth is you don't accept no and you're trying to shame me into compliance." She accused me of always playing the victim and acting attacked when people confront me. I told her, "And you always play helpless when you want something and vicious when you don't get it." At that point my parents tried to step in and told both of us to lower our voices and stop causing a scene. I said to them, "She's been harassing me for weeks and you keep acting like I'm the one who needs to just give in." My sister shouted that I was dramatic, selfish, and that I loved attention. I shouted back that she was controlling, manipulative, and exhausting to deal with. She said, "You think you're so independent but really you just don't care about anyone but yourself." I said, "And you think you're entitled to everyone's time because you refuse to manage your own chaos." Someone else tried to calm her down and she snapped at them too, saying no one ever supported her and everyone expected her to just struggle alone. I said, "Stop rewriting the story. You're not being abandoned, you're being told no." She said I had no empathy and that I was emotionally empty. I said, "And you're emotionally aggressive when you don't get your way." The entire room went dead silent. You could feel everyone watching. She started crying and said I had just publicly attacked her and embarrassed her in front of everyone. I said, "You confronted me in public and now you're shocked I answered you." She said I always twist things to make myself look reasonable. I said, "I don't need to twist anything. Your behavior speaks for itself." She stormed out, knocking into a chair on the way and yelling that she couldn't believe how cruel I was. Within an hour she had posted about being publicly attacked and humiliated by her own sister and how people show their true colors when you're vulnerable. People started messaging me again asking what happened, saying they were sorry for what I did to her, saying she looked really hurt. I messaged her and said, "You attacked me first and you know it." She replied, "You destroyed me in front of everyone and you don't even care." I said, "You tried to shame me into agreeing and it didn't work." She said, "You could have just said yes and none of this would have happened." I said, "So your solution is that I should give in so you don't cause drama." She said I was heartless and blocked me again. After that, the posts kept coming, not directly naming me, but clear enough that anyone who knew us knew exactly who she was talking about. Update 4. Right before my vacation, she went nuclear in a way I honestly did not expect. I found out because my supervisor pulled me aside and asked if everything was okay at home because someone had contacted work saying there might be a family crisis and that I could be unreachable soon. I felt my stomach drop. I was embarrassed, furious, and completely blindsided. I told my supervisor there was no crisis and that everything was fine, but I was shaking when I walked away. The second I got a chance, I messaged my sister and said, "Do not involve my job in your drama ever again." She replied, "I wasn't involving them. I was just being responsible in case something happened." I said, "You had no reason to contact my workplace at all. That was invasive and out of line." She said, "You're overreacting like always." I said, "No, you crossed a line and you know it." She called me immediately and started screaming that I was accusing her of sabotaging me and that she was only trying to protect me. I yelled back, "You absolutely did this on purpose to pressure me and you're pretending it was concern." She said, "Maybe if you acted like family, I wouldn't have to worry about you disappearing." I said, "Threatening my job is not family behavior, it's controlling." She said I was cold, calculating, and that I only cared about myself and my stupid plans. I told her, "You are not scaring me. You are humiliating yourself and dragging me into it." She said I'd regret treating her this way and that people don't forget who helps and who doesn't. I said, "Are you seriously trying to guilt trip me with social punishment now?" She said, "I'm telling you how this looks." I said, "I don't care how it looks to people you're feeding half stories to." She started yelling that I always make her the villain and that I enjoy making her feel small. I yelled back that she was doing a great job of making herself look bad without my help. She hung up on me mid-sentence. Not even an hour later, my parents called. They said my sister was in pieces and that I needed to stop antagonizing her and just compromise for the sake of peace. I said, "What compromise are you talking about? I either cancel my vacation or I don't." They said I was being rigid, dramatic, and stubborn. I said, "And she's being aggressive, manipulative, and now she's contacting my job." They said she was just stressed and that I should be the bigger person. I said, "So your solution is that I sacrifice my plans so she calms down?" They said I was tearing the family apart over something small. I said, "She is the one escalating every time I don't give her what she wants." They said I was escalating too by refusing to bend. I said, refusing to be controlled is not escalation. They told me that if I kept pushing back, I was going to damage relationships that might not recover. I said, she already damaged this when she started lying about me and contacting my workplace. They said I should stop keeping score and just help her. I said, this is not keeping score. This is me refusing to be steamrolled. Then my sister started messaging again while I was still on the phone with my parents, sending angry texts saying I was trying to turn them against her and that I was poisoning everyone with my version of events. Hold on tight. Before I share the full story, tap that like, subscribe, and let's talk in the comments. Would you have done the same thing? I told my parents, she's texting me right now accusing me of manipulating you. They said she was just emotional. I said, no, she is aggressive and you keep excusing it. That's when they said if I was going to keep causing conflict, maybe I shouldn't come around for a while. I said, so now I'm being punished for not giving in. They said they were tired of the drama and that I was contributing to it. I said, I didn't start this and I'm not the one contacting workplaces and posting online. They said they just wanted peace. I said, peace at my expense is not peace, it's pressure. They said I was being difficult and that I was choosing a vacation over my own family. I said, I am choosing not to be bullied. My sister then called while I was still processing that conversation and immediately started yelling that I had turned our parents against her and that I was trying to make her look unstable. I yelled back, you contacted my job and now you're shocked people are upset with you. She said, I did that because you forced me into this situation. I said, I didn't force you into anything. You created this chaos. She said I was heartless and that I enjoyed watching her struggle. I said, what I don't enjoy is being treated like your personal safety net. She said I was selfish and fake and that I never cared about her kids or her. I said, stop rewriting history because you can't handle boundaries. She said, you're not coming back from this. I said, you already crossed lines you can't uncross. She told me not to contact her again unless I was ready to help. I told her, then don't expect me to answer at all. After that, my parents stopped responding to my messages entirely. No calls, no replies, nothing. And now my vacation is days away and it feels like everything is sitting on this ticking bomb where everyone update 5. I noticed my sister stopped messaging me completely. No insults, no demands, nothing. My parents were still silent too. It felt like the calm before something ugly, and I was right. 2 days before I was supposed to leave, I woke up to notifications from people I barely talked to asking if I was okay and if the rumors were true. I had no idea what they were talking about, so I checked social media. My sister had posted a long, emotional story saying she was dealing with a serious family emergency and that she had been abandoned by someone she trusted and that she was terrified and alone trying to protect her children. No names, but it was very clear who she meant. Then my mom shared it. Then an aunt shared it. Then more people started posting about how some people don't understand responsibility and how family should come before selfish choices. My phone started blowing up, not asking what happened, not asking for my side, just messages like, I can't believe you do this to her. How could you leave right now? Those kids don't deserve this. I snapped. I messaged my sister and said, you need to take that down right now. She replied, I'm allowed to share my feelings. I said, you are lying and making it sound like there's some crisis that doesn't exist. She said, it feels like a crisis when you refuse to help. I said, that does not give you the right to paint me as some villain abandoning children. She said, maybe you should have thought about that before you booked a vacation. I lost it and called her. She answered already yelling. She said, so now you're mad that people know what kind of person you are? I yelled, you are manipulating everyone with fake drama and you know exactly what you're doing. She yelled, you left me with no choice. I yelled, your choice was to find childcare, not to start a smear campaign. She said, you think you're so important with your little trip while I'm drowning. I said, I am not your emergency plan and I never agreed to be. She screamed that I was cruel, that I had no empathy, that I didn't deserve to be part of the family if I could turn my back like this. I screamed back that she was acting unhinged and dragging innocent people into her tantrum. She said, at least everyone can finally see how selfish you are. I said, everyone can see how far you're willing to go to punish someone for saying no. She hung up and immediately blocked me again. Then my parents finally called, not to ask what happened, to tell me I had taken things too far. They said my sister was having panic attacks, that I had humiliated her, that I should have just kept this private instead of letting it spiral. I said, she made it public, not me. They said I should have gone to her instead of arguing. I said, I tried. She keeps escalating. They said I should cancel my trip trip and stay until things calm down. I said, so after all of this, you still think I should give her what she wants? They said, this isn't about what she wants, it's about stopping the damage. I said, the damage is already done because she chose to attack me publicly. They said I was choosing a vacation over family harmony. I said, you're choosing her behavior over my boundaries. They said if I left now, I shouldn't expect things to be the same when I came back. I said, things haven't been the same for weeks. Then my sister unblocked me just long enough to send a message saying, if you walk out now, don't bother pretending you care about us anymore. I replied, you don't get to rewrite reality just because I won't obey you. She responded, you're dead to me. Then she blocked me again. Later that day, someone sent me a screenshot of her posting that she had lost a sister and that she was grieving the betrayal. That's when I finally posted something myself. Not details, just there is no emergency. I was asked to provide free childcare during a trip I booked months ago. I said no. That's the entire situation. That set off another wave. My sister messaged me from a different account and said, you're trying to destroy me. I said, you destroyed your own narrative by lying. She said I was cruel and that I had turned everyone against her. I said, you turned everyone against me first. My parents called again, furious this time, saying I embarrassed the family by airing things publicly. I said, I defended myself after weeks of being dragged. They said I should delete it. I said, I'm not deleting the truth so she can keep playing victim. They told me not to come around anymore until I could act like part of the family again. I said, I am not apologizing for not being bullied into childcare. That night, my sister sent one last message through a relative's phone saying if anything went wrong while I was gone, it would be my fault. I replied, your kids are not my responsibility. That was the last message I sent. The next morning, I left as planned. No one called. No one said goodbye. No one tried to stop me. By the time I landed, I had been removed from family chats, unfollowed by multiple relatives, and blocked by my sister everywhere. I don't know what she told people after that. I just know that by the time I was officially gone, the decision had already been made for me. I was the problem in their story, and I wasn't fixing it by staying. The end. Your sister is a manipulative, entitled nightmare who tried to hijack your vacation, lied to the whole family that you already said yes, smeared you as unstable/heartless/abandoning the kids, weaponized her own children for guilt, contacted your job to pressure you, and played victim on blast when you wouldn't cave. Parents and relatives are spineless enablers who'd rather bully the boundary haver than tell the actual problem adult to sort her own damn childcare. You said no to being voluntold into free labor. That's not selfish. That's having a spine. You went on the trip you earned. Good. Block the circus and breathe. If they ever want you back in their lives, it starts with apologies and zero assumptions about your time. Not vague posts and guilt trips. Sister equals massive AH. Family equals flying monkey AH squad. You equals NTA. Queen of no means no. Enjoy the peace. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Got a story to share? Drop it in the comments and let us know which one was your favorite.